Thank you. Thank you for inviting me to participate today. I've spent the last nearly 10 years researching industrial agriculture, intensive livestock farming and its impacts, mainly focusing on the rivers Wye and River Severn. And I was wondering my career has been segueing between being an academic, a research consultant. I worked for the Food Farming Countryside Commission. I'm a river tester. I'm an advisor for River Action. And today I was wondering how I would be speaking alongside some very eminent scientists as a little bit of a maverick social scientist. But I decided the best way to address it was to look at three key questions and just raise them alongside as we look at a lot of the data. It's to ask what data is actually, what data are we not seeing, what data does not exist. Also to question the data that we do get given, particularly some of the official data. And also how else can we source data and get better data. So I've got three specific examples and trying to draw some lessons out of that. So the first one, I started researching at Cardiff University in 2016, awfully long time ago, when I started investigating the poultry industry, particularly in Herefordshire and Shropshire. And I discovered that very few statistics. I just couldn't quite believe that there wasn't any data, that the local authorities in Herefordshire, Shropshire, Powys, which was my main focus, just don't keep records of intensive livestock units or the numbers of chickens in them. And the agricultural census data looked very doubtful, shall we say, really underestimating what we thought was out there. So I spent literally months going through the planning records for Shropshire and Herefordshire. I later looked at environmental permit data from the Environment Agency to try and cross-check the planning and the permitting information. And the campaign to protect rural Wales, who I should really big up. I don't think there's anyone from there here today, but they've been doing similar work in Powys. And we put all our data together. We created some absolutely enormous spreadsheets, and one of their volunteers put together this map, which shows you where all the intensive poultry units are across those three counties. And you can see there's an awful lot of them. And we found our findings when we started pushing this in about 2020, 2021, when we gave an initial estimate for the River Wye catchment of 20 million chickens. That caused quite a lot of ripples. It was covered in newspapers. We were featured in that documentary Riverside, and it suddenly caught people's imagination. And it just showed up what the official statistics were deficient. The Wales Agricultural Census said there were 10 million chickens in the whole of Wales. Well, CPRW's statistics says there's 10 million in Powys on its own, so there could be 15 or 20 million across the whole country. Similarly, the data for England was equally, even within DEFRA, the Environment Agency, DEFRA and the Animal Plant Health Authority have completely different figures for numbers of birds. So covering this, looking at this map, we now think there's nearly 60 million chickens in that particular area. And I'm just going to point out that's about 80 times the size of the human population in that area. So in other words, there's about 80 chickens for every person living in those counties. And if you do the maths on the amount of muck produced, which is obviously getting a bit horrible, but it's 10 or 15 times the amount of actual manure that has to be dealt with. So the lessons from that are that numbers are powerful, that if you get robust numbers, they can capture people's imagination. Don't necessarily believe the official statistics. And why aren't we requiring local authorities to keep better data on what's going on in their areas. These are industrial installations, they have to be permitted. So why do we not know where they all are and what they have? Oh, and another point from this map is we need to join up across the English-Welsh border. The catchments run across border. We need to work cross-border as well. So my second example is shifting to the River Severn. I've shifted my attention to the Severn more recently. Loads of people were carrying on in the Wye, which is fantastic, but I felt that the same story is unfolding in the River Severn catchment. I couldn't find the source apportionment. Nigel was talking about source apportionment, so I was trying to dig out the source apportionment data for the Severn, and it wasn't very available. And I put in a Freedom of Information request for it, and this is the map of the whole of the Severn catchment. And I identified from the data that the upper Severn, that sort of Shropshire Powys section, the modelling showed that agriculture was responsible for 60–65% of the pollution, much more in one or two of the very upland catchments, tributaries. But I was niggling about this data. It didn't seem, I don't know, I just sort of thought there's something wrong there. So I put another Freedom of Information request in and asked where they got the input data to that modelling. What was the livestock input numbers going into the modelling they were using? And I was horrified when I got the reply back a month later to say not only were they using the agricultural census, which is what I was saying is hugely underrepresentative, but they were using the census from 2010. And from my data, I know that there's been about 150 new and expanded intensive poultry units across that patch since 2010. Another 12 million poultry, and the other livestock numbers have shifted as well. So why are we doing this modelling and making decisions on the management of a catchment based on this sort of data, which is obviously not going to be anywhere near the realistic situation? And local authorities are continuing to give permission for further intensive poultry units because they think it's all right. River Action and myself are currently got a legal challenge against Shropshire Council. So the lesson from that one is to keep digging, check the assumptions, check the dates, and don't take things at face value. And then my final example is slightly more positive and saying, well, how can we do things to improve the situation? And this takes me back to when I was sitting in a meeting of the River Wye Nutrient Management Board back in 2018. And I can distinctly remember the Environment Agency officer coming to his feet and revealing to the rest of the committee that the number of sampling points across the whole of the River Wye catchment were going to have to be reduced from the 30 that they were using at that point, and they were going to have to reduce them down to just 8 for the whole catchment, monitoring the water quality. And this was due to budget constraints. And there were shocked faces all around the table. He said, we're going to have to water monitor differently. And people were sort of rolling their eyes a bit. And there's a nutrient management board for a reason, because it was well established that they needed to manage that much better. Now, as it happens, in 2020, 2021, the outrage over the state of the River Wye, the figure about the chickens had become known. The river itself was obviously deteriorating in front of people's eyes. And over 500 local people mobilised and volunteered, supported by the Environment Agency and actually Cardiff University and others. They mobilised to set up citizen science water quality monitoring across the catchment. And this is a screen grab from the YViz, which Pat's going to come and talk a little bit more about in a moment. There's still over 200 regular volunteer testers across the Wye catchment, and the data they're producing is really, really valuable. So the lessons from that one I wanted to flag up are that people really care about their local rivers. People are willing to monitor, they're keen, they love seeing the results, they love seeing the graphs develop from their monitoring across a year or so. But there's one word of warning there, is that we need to value that lay data. We shouldn't dismiss it and say, oh, but it's not experts out there, it's not experts doing the testing. Actually, when you benchmark the results from the volunteers, they're just as robust as from the agencies. And I would just want to add at the end there that citizen scientists are calling for more. They're involved in this testing, they see it as really valuable, but they want to see action as a result of it. They want to see, when they spot pollution rising, they want to see it investigated. They want enforcement. They want the polluter to pay. And I'm sure those are issues we're going to come on to in the rest of the conference. Thank you.